Hi, I'm Dave Bundy, editor of the Lincoln Journal-Star, and this is our editorial endorsement interview with Roy Christensen, legislative candidate in District 28. Roy, thanks a bunch for being with us today.
You're more than welcome.
And before you do all the talking, we'll have Kent tell readers who he is before the fun begins.
Okay.
Kent?
I'm Kent Walgamot. I write about arts and entertainment. I've been on the editorial board for more than a decade and have therefore spoken with Roy on multiple occasions.
All right.
Very good.
As have I. So, well, Roy, you've been on the city council. You know a thing or two about elected office. It doesn't look like a particularly fun time right now to be in elected office, but you're running for the legislature. So the first question is why, and then, what experiences and attributes qualify you for service in the legislature?
Sure. Well, at first, I really wasn't too keen on running for unicameral just because of, like you mentioned, now is not a great time to be in elected office. A lot of things going on that are not all that pleasant to deal with. And this opportunity came about because the districts were redrawn. I was living in LD 25, and the redistricting put me into LD 28. And a number of people kept asking me. I was reluctant. And then one day my wife says to me, if you don't run because you think you might lose, you've already lost. And so I decided, well, yeah, she's a pretty wise person. And so I'm running. There's a lot of things that need to be done with our unicameral. One of the things that motivates me is service before self and people before politics. I tend to be more of a populist person, listening to people and seeing what they want to do. Another motivator for me is that it seems to me over the years that Lincoln has not gotten its fair share of the tax dollars. We produce more than we consume from the state, and we should be getting a little bit more back. One example of that is excise taxes. We don't even get half of the excise taxes Lincoln citizens pay back invested in Lincoln. Something we need to look at very closely in the unicameral. I would say one of the big problems the unicameral has, and I think everybody understands that we have two specific divides. One is the divide between rural and urban, and the other is between conservative and liberal. And what's happened in the past is when those two divides come into play and the voters of Lincoln send people who are both urban, we got to send urban people there. And then on the liberal side, we tend not to have representation that gets along with everybody else and can do the job to get Lincoln its fair share. If you look back in the past, look at the people who have been able to get that done. I look at Marion Price and recently Mike Hilgers. What happens to other representatives from Lincoln is they get kind of shoved to the side when the real decision making is going on. And I think I'm a person who can go into that situation and not be marginalized and be able to help promote our city's needs.
All right. You talked a little bit about the divides. How do you represent constituents that just disagree with your thoughts on particular issues?
Well, as a person who's represented others before on the city council, I have to really remember that I represent everyone, not just certain people. I can't say these are my constituents and these are not. And so how I represent that best is by listening, talking to people, hearing what they have to say, and reasoning out with people from different positions what is reasonable to do in the unicameral.
All right. you don't waste any words, Roy. We're flying through these questions.
Okay,
So if you feel the need to
you want me to,
elaborate,
be a little more verbose?
No,
I can do that.
you can be however you like.
Okay,
So
thanks.
the next question, immigration is largely a federal issue, but that doesn't stop the legislature from talking about it, whether it's the Dreamers, whether it was that question about professional licensures. What do you think the state is? Are there things the state should be doing as far as changing immigration policy to the extent that it can?
Sure. I think one of the things, I was talking a couple of weeks ago with some folks, and a couple of the people there were managers or even owner of big development companies here in Lincoln. And we were talking about these immigrants who are being bused to different places. And one of them said, well, can't we get a couple buses? Because as you tell us when they're going to be there and where they're going to stop in Lincoln, we'll be there with job applications. You know, we want these people, and we need immigrants to come into Lincoln. And we're a welcoming city, and we're a welcoming state, but we need these folks to come and live and work in our community.
So accusations of voter fraud still kind of swirling around on the, particularly on the national level, but we have an initiative, a ballot initiative, the voter ID one in November. First of all, what would you do if you were pressured to play a role in overturning an election? And then are more protections warranted either on the side of protecting voter rights or on the side of protecting a secured system?
Well, I think you don't have to have either or, you can have both. The time to shut the barn doors before the horses get out. So preventing some things from going wrong beforehand is a good idea, but also having systems in place that guarantees that anybody who wants to vote and needs it, for example, if we're talking about voter ID and needs an ID, should be provided one. It should be a fairly simple process. And since if the state passes this, then the state needs to provide the resources to make sure everybody has access to the voting ballot. If I were in a situation where I had to be concerned about overturning an election, boy, that's hard. I would be reluctant to overturn any election as long as there were not absolute evidence of flagrant and pervasive fraud.
All right, so as long as we're hitting complicated issues, the Dobbs ruling by the Supreme Court sends the question of abortion back to the states. It's almost a certainty that the legislature will be dealing with those issues. Describe your views on prohibiting or limiting abortion in Nebraska.
I believe that every individual has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that includes people who yet have their own voice. I do not believe that abortion should be used as a contraceptive method, nor as a convenience. I do believe that abortion should remain legal when the issue is the death of the mother or not.
All right. I know that was on the voter's guide questionnaire too. I've got one more question before Kent goes and does his Kent questions, and then I will come back to me for one last one. Should the legislature scrap nonpartisanship? And if not, how do you work to help restore it?
Well, first of all, everybody knows who has an R or a D behind their name. That's not a secret. The question is, can people get along? And I see significant value in having a secret vote for chairmanships in the unicameral. However, currently, it is unconstitutional to have secret votes. So I think we would need to have a constitutional amendment to provide for that. Now, people say, well, Roy, they already have these secret votes, even though you say it's unconstitutional. Well, I have taken a couple of oaths in my lifetime, and I take them seriously. When I became an officer in the Army, I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. When I became a city council person, I took an oath to I renewed that oath to protect the Constitution of the United States and to then continue to protect the Constitution of the state of Nebraska. I take those commitments very seriously. And even if everybody is doing what is clearly prohibited, I can't do that. But I can see the reason why they want to do it, and there's a solution to it. Amend the Constitution.
All right. Kent, it's time for you to lean forward and start asking your couple of questions.
First off, as you know, most of the work in a legislature or the city council or gets done in committee or some sort of smaller group. Have you given any consideration to what committees you'd want to try to get on if you were elected?
Well, first of all, my interests lie in the governmental affairs and veterans. I would love to be able to serve there. However, I also understand that as a new person on the block, if elected, that I'd be happy to take whatever roles that the senior legislators would see fit for me. I have a problem with people who arrive at a new organization or a new situation and say, well, now that I'm here, we can get things done. I think the way to get things done is to listen and create personal relationships that can help you understand the process, the unwritten rules. There are unwritten rules to the unicameral, just like there were to the city council. And you really don't learn those unwritten rules until you are there for a little while. The people that arrive and say, here I am, we're going to do all these wonderful things. They tend to crash and burn and not get much done.
I have some specific sort of issue things, and Dave will appreciate that. I'm starting with my usual, you've been through this routine with me, my water interests.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on the two big water projects that sorta kinda got approved by the last legislature? The canal out in southwest Nebraska and the lake up by Ashland.
Well, and you've heard me say this before, in the West, water's for fighting and whiskey's for drinking. And we've got huge issues with water. That water limits our ability to grow and to produce. And I'm in favor of both of those projects. They need to be done, especially the Western one needs to be done to protect our water rights for agriculture in the West. I think the reservoir in the eastern part of the state is a good idea to provide for water resources as well as recreational opportunities. Did I cover that all?
Yep, you
Okay.
certainly did. Next up is another contentious one that seemingly comes up every year and never gets dealt with is do we need to build a new prison, or what needs to be done to address the overcrowding in the prison system?
Well, you have to solve the overcrowding problem somehow, and I believe a new prison is warranted. There's lots of proposals out there in the country right now to say, okay, we can reduce the number of people in prison by changing our laws and reducing punishments. And the problem that I've seen around the headlines is that when cities and states do those things, it ends up with increased crime. And that's exactly the opposite of what we want our judicial system to provide. We want it to provide safety and security for everyone and deterrence for criminals. So we will have to have a new prison, but we all should be looking at other ideas that won't encourage crime.
And finally, one that we could take all afternoon and talk about, but the property tax issue. How do we solve this? You know, property tax relief without, you know, bankrupting the schools or,
Mhm.
you know, yeah. How do you strike that taxation balance?
Well, right now, I believe that our three-legged stool of taxation is way out of whack. It's not working. I think everybody can agree there's some problems with that. Uh, the property tax issue is very difficult because it highlights the urban-rural divide. You know, if we have some of the most highly taxed farmland in the nation in this state. So we need to find a way to alleviate that pressure on agriculture because the business of Nebraska is agriculture. And as much as people in Lincoln might not feel that directly, if there were a crash in ag, in beef production or in corn production in this state, everybody would feel it. So you can't, I don't think we can continue to address our taxes in terms of get off the backs of property owners. We could take a look at different kinds of sales tax, and increasing sales tax, increasing any tax is never pleasant, but that should be on the table as well. We should look at what are we charging, what are we exempting from sales tax, and perhaps the real solution is not to increase sales tax, but to reduce the exemptions, and then that will allow us to reduce the property taxes as well. And income taxes, that's a whole other issue too. There are states that do really, really well, who don't have income taxes at all, and they have healthier budgets than we do.
All right, you got through all of Kent's questions in record time too. So Roy,
Okay.
the last thing I have for you is what didn't we ask you that you wish we would have?
Well, I'll take a twist on that question. What didn't you ask that I'm glad you didn't ask? All sorts of people ask me, what are your priorities? What do you want to present when you get to the unicameral? What legislation are you going to propose? And so what do you want to accomplish? Well, a couple things. One, this idea I expressed earlier about people who arrive new on the scene and say, now we're going to do all these wonderful things, tend to get shot down. What I intend to do my first 6 months in the unicameral is listen and learn how things are done, establish personal relationships with every other state senator, because that's really where things get done, is through personal relationships. And the other important part of being a state senator is to stop bad legislation. So those are the issues are my priorities right there. I don't have a list of issues that I want to hit right away when I hit the unicameral to pass this bill or that bill. Issues change over time, and they're always changing. Some take a lot longer to change, but the other thing that's important to remember is people generally don't change. So when you have somebody with a modus operandi, that tends to remain the way they act and the way they behave. And so I can tell people that when I get there, I'll probably behave much as I did when I was on the city council. I'll be a unifier, and much of that work takes place behind the scenes. And I'll look for ways to bridge gaps.
All right. Well, you have some available time, but you don't have to take it, Roy.
Well,
if there's anything else you want to add.
Well, I was told once upon a time, the more you say to a journalist, the more you can get in trouble.
Well,
So.
There's some truth to that.
Yeah,
yeah, maybe so, but I think we're good guys here.
we are. You are. Yeah.
But Roy, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your public service, your desire to continue serving the public, and we wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, Roy. Good to see you.
Thanks a
Good to
bunch.
see you too.
See you.
Go Big Red.